Testament for this morning is from the Gospel of Mark. This story reflects the disagreements and conflicts that were going on within the community of the Jewish community of the first century, as it sought to define itself in relation to the Gentile world in which it was surrounded. And there were within the community major disagreements that happened over what kind of contacts were acceptable with Gentiles, with those outside the community. And many of those issues focused on the treatment of food and of the things that made a person unclean, that is, defiled. Now, many of the practices that Jews established in the first century have been recognized over the centuries since then as things that are hygienically sound, such as washing your hands or washing things that you bring home from the market, as is reflected in this story, as you will hear. But in the community of Israel, one of the things that was happening was that those relatively minor matters were defined as that which constituted sin and that made a person evil and defiled, so that there were major issues that were developed that defined whether a person was righteous or whether they were evil around what they did with their food and whether they washed their hands. So that the issues were not just hygienic, they were religious in relation to God. And so Jesus and the Pharisees, representatives of different parts of the community of Israel in this period, disagreed about these things. And it is in the context of that disagreement that this story is told. So I would invite you to hear this then as part of a community that has major disagreements about things that have to do with matters and practices that to some would appear unimportant or relatively trivial. Any connections between what was happening in the ancient world and what is happening now in the church are direct and immediate. So you will be able to also imagine and to identify those things that are happening now in regard to the disputes in the church. It happened like this. Some Pharisees and scribes who had come down from Jerusalem to Galilee had gathered around Jesus and were talking with him. And they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all of the Jewish community did not eat without first thoroughly washing their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. When they brought things home from the market, they did not eat them until they had washed them. And they had many other customs, such as the washing of pots and pans, cups, and vessels of bronze. And so they said to Jesus, "Why do your disciples eat with defiled hands and do not live according to the tradition of the elders?" And Jesus said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites when he said, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me.' They hold on to the traditions of human beings, but forsake and abandon the commandments of God. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine human precepts. And then he called together the crowd. And he said to them, "Listen to me, all of you. Pay attention to what I say. There is nothing that is outside a person that by going into them defiles them. It is the things that come out of a person that defile them. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come. Fornication, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. These things come from within a person, and they are what defile.